Life isn't fair, or is it? This week on Carlie's Couch, we discuss our thoughts and the phrase, life isn't fair. Hola, everybody. Hopefully, y'all are blessed and abundant and peaceful today.
And if you're not, sorry about that. Hope you can figure it out. Welcome to the couch. Thanks for listening. We are going to have a discussion around this phrase, life isn't fair, which I would say is a phrase I've heard quite often. It's very much a part of pop culture, different sayings we've heard, etc. Would you say that as well?
Oh, yeah. Well, you hear that from the moment as I say, knee high to a grasshopper. Shout out to Oklahoma. But you start hearing that, like, that's everybody's response to things. You see it on movies. You see it on all kind of stuff. It's like the punchline on action movies, like all kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I guess my first question, thinking about the term, like, life isn't fair, is, like, do you agree with that?
It comes down to the philosophical thought of like what fair is. And so I don't think life is fair to everybody's version of fair because that's different. I think that it probably has checks and balances and equals out. So probably over the large scale, but it doesn't seem fair to probably the majority of people.
Yeah, because if life was fair, what does that mean? That's like what I think about it. If life was fair, what does that mean?
What is fair?
That means that maybe everybody gets the same, deals with the same problem. That means everybody has the same access or level of success. But to your point, fair is subjective. So for me, I'm thinking like fair means we all have access to the same thing or are given the same thing or have the same opportunity, which we do not. You could think about it also like if fair is, why do some things happen like genocides and casualties and just like different parts of the world, like is that fair? Is it fair that some people live in places where there's drought? Some people live in places that are tropical. Some people live in places that are this or that. Like life is different all across the board. But I think what would make it fair in my mind is if people got what they sow or like reap what they sow. And also if they could do anything, but that's not really a thing.
Yeah, I think the idea of fair is so interesting because it's like people are like, oh, why is it fair that a baby dies of cancer, but then this, or why all these babies getting shot up and people are living to old age? Like, what is fair? Also, like, why so many people, had to endure slavery? Like so many generations of people had to endure like that terribleness of slavery. Is that fair? Like, no. And that people benefited and built the country on the backs of these people and their work, like absolutely not fair. But I wonder, do you know where the saying came from?
No, but in thinking about why people would say like, oh, life isn't fair, like that's the next thing I think about is like, well, why do we say this phrase? Like, what do we need from that? And it's almost like a reminder, I think, that I feel like it's mostly used, life isn't fair, when you take a L or when you have a loss or if you're talking to somebody in it and they took a L, essentially, right? Because ain't nobody thinking about life being fair when you're winning. So for me, similar to how like with some of the other phrases like we talk about it, it's like I feel like people talk about life isn't fair when you like going through some stuff. And because everybody is always going through something, at some point are you going to have a disappointment or you tried so hard and you didn't get right. Like that's when it feels like it's not fair. It's like I did what I thought I was supposed to do and something didn't happen right. I think that's where you're most likely to hear people be like, well, life's not fair, or you're not always going to win, or you're not going to get this or that. Like when do you ever really hear it otherwise as far as like having to do with the person not taking an L?
No, No, I was about to say it absolutely is like when something doesn't go the way that it's expected or in the favorable way of the person. It's always when I hear it, I think sometimes like it gets ingrained in ourselves too as a way to justify or maybe make us feel better. Like, oh, it's okay because life isn't fair. You know, I shouldn't expect every win. But then that comes to like, you know, what our expectations. But I remember very staunchly, we were having one of those like parties at school when they cut the pizza into little tiny pieces. And they had ran out, and then the teacher was like, well, life isn't fair. And it's like, bro, what? Y'all should have just planned better. But like also becomes a way to just assuage like somebody else missing the mark and like maybe leaving someone else out to dry. I think a lot of these things are meant to just make us feel better about like where we are.
And I had a very fleeting thought because I cannot think of it also from something you had just said about when we use the term life
Our
isn't
expectations.
fair. No, maybe it'll come back around at some point. But I don't. I try to also think about like, is there anybody who you can look at them and be like, their life is fair, and like, what is that? What that means? Can you think of anybody?
I would say like one of my homegirls. People would probably look at her and say her life is fair because she grew up with both parents. They're a doctor and a lawyer. They have money. She's been healthy, got to do all the things they wanted. They had like a vacation house. She went to college, went to law school, like the #1 in the U.S., got her dream job and moved to LA, you know, was with her partner, just had a baby. So people probably could look at her and say, oh, her life is fair. Or like more than fair or better. Like she was one of the people who got a good life or something like that. But it's like you really have no idea all the shit behind that and like what it took to get her there or different things or even the things that still affected her while she was in that. But she's like the first person that came to mind when people could like look on the outside and maybe not know the inside and what's going on and be like, oh, she has a good life, a fair life.
Okay, so that makes sense, and I think that it sounds like for the most part we think about life being fair based on our perception of other people's life in some kind of comparison a lot of times, because otherwise like what, you know, it's like, okay, well, what's like fair or not fair about it, unless it's like, no, I want what that looks like. And it sounds like what Carlie is saying too is like, you don't know the full story of everything, but perhaps you can look at somebody and say, well, they have everything, and so life isn't fair. I don't know if I would ever look at anybody even like that, because like I also just, I would never be like, I want to be that person, and so I still don't know if there's anybody where I'd be like, man, life is fair to them. And quite frankly, that's because I also think about, what does it mean for life to really be fair? Because it's not, even though we might use it when we take a L or when somebody takes a L, quite frankly, like, what would life look like if it was fair? If life was fair, there's also so many things so many more L's I think we would have taken, based off of things that we did or didn't do, running across the street without looking as a kid, from like little stuff like that to like cheating on a test and you didn't get caught. There are so many things where it's like, well, why do we just say, well, life isn't fair when you don't get something that you think you should have got or deserved? But like nobody thinks they should have got or deserved any of the bad things. Or like nobody really thinks about, oh, I should have went to jail. Life's not fair. I should have been in jail right now. Like nobody's saying that. So it's like, what exactly is the point of this phrase? Like, why is it, you know, why does it become like such a staple part when it's like, do you really want life to be fair?
Yeah, I was about to say, because like I liked your definition or thoughts of like fair. What fair means is like you reap what you sow. Like you do the work, you bear the fruit, right? Like that's cool. You think like, okay, I planted this tree, I water it, it's going to give me fruit one day. Like, all right, cool. But then there are so many times in my life where like I was quote unquote lucky, or, you know, I didn't like maybe do the thing, or I turned in something late, but everything still worked out for me. And so
was that fair?
Yeah, exactly. Is that fair? Or like, whenever, like, let's say you're trying to get your license at the DMV, you know, the DMV is just a whole adventure for most people, but like, you know somebody there, and so you can get in and not have to worry about the stuff. Like, is that fair? like that you didn't have to wait in that line with other people. But then it also makes me laugh because driving in traffic, you know how when lanes merge, like some people try to get into the lane and pass all the cars that have been waiting and get over. Is that fair? Like,
yeah, so it's funny because really when we say, oh, life isn't fair, we're almost using it to say like, oh man, I didn't win this time, and not really talking about the fairness of life at all. And so is there any danger in believing that? Like we've both said in our way, like, okay, like life is not fair, and it's not fair because innocent people take L's all the time. People who might be terrible people are, you know, air quote, winning at life. We don't always reap what we sow both ways. Like life is not exactly fair. And is there any danger in believing that? Like, is there anything harmful to a mindset of life isn't fair that you can think of?
I think that if you're not careful, because words mean things, I think that if you're not careful, it can become an excuse for you to not like push yourself or go for things or like impact the narratives in your life, because life isn't fair anyway. So why am I going to do the work to do this? Because it might not work out or whatever. I think it can be kind of insidious in the sense of like, if you just accept that. Well, because also, I don't know, it's a very interesting question, but that's like when you talk about danger, I'm like, where can it harm me to believe that life is not fair? And
like, where can it hold you back? Maybe.
Yeah, that was my first thing, is like, how can that thought hold me back?
But how can, I mean,
maybe it like makes you stay in situations that you're not supposed to be in or that aren't the best for you, because like you're in this relationship that's like okay, or at this job that's cool, but like, you know, oh, this is just how the cards were dealt to me. And I think about older people who were more set in their ways, like when I say these things. So like they just believe that life has to be bad and has to beat you down and has to do that. And I can think that that can kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, good. It came full circle. So one of the dangers is like whenever you have this belief that, you know, things just aren't going to work out, which not everything is going to work out for you. Sorry, dog. It just is that, like, that is true. But
big facts.
Yeah, but sorry, dog. Like, it doesn't matter how good you are, how amazing you are, so loved, and shit will still fail for you. I wish it didn't, but it does. But then I think about people who are like immobile or open to things or don't want to change. Like, it just makes me think about like the older generations in the sense like, well, life isn't fair. So they endured bullshit ass jobs, terrible relationships, abuse, like different situations.
Okay, so if you use the mindset of life isn't fair to justify not trying and to allow that to let you stick with like your circumstance, what are good things that come out of recognizing that life isn't fair or using that phrase, life isn't fair?
I think that it helps us. I'm so glad we're talking about this, because I feel like I've been hearing life isn't fair my whole life, but I've never did a deep dive on what that actually means. But I think that sometimes it can help us feel better about the stuff we can't explain, like the genocides, like these little babies getting shot up at school, like slavery, like different things. Like, not that you can justify slavery with life isn't fair, that's not what I mean, but in the sense of like things we can't explain, you're like, man, shit's just gonna happen sometimes. And so maybe like I think it can be helpful to understand that, but then also like knowing that your expectations on certain situations will not be met. And I don't think like life isn't fair maybe like means that, but just knowing that my expectations of like what the work I'm putting in and the result, like I can't ever control the result. It won't always be exactly what I want.
I see that. So a positive, what you were saying is a positive to recognizing that life isn't fair is that perhaps it's easier to accept the ups and downs of things. Let's say the downs, because still ain't nobody talking about life is fair when it's good. And maybe that's something that we could do more often, is that, you know, when your meeting does get pushed that you weren't prepared for, and be like, man, you know, sometimes I'm glad life is not fair. Like I'm glad I don't have as much control as I act like I do. And I think that can probably in the same vein, or maybe even saying the same thing, but just to say it a different way, that one good thing about having a mindset of, you know, life isn't fair is that you can maybe relinquish your control over everything having to be a certain way, or the way things unfold or the way things happen, because you don't really know. But yet still, I think, even as we continue to talk about it, like, your life isn't fair is something that you say when, somebody runs into your car, or when something happens, or when you're dealing with something. And it could from there go to a, well, things happen, like, all right, moving on next. Or it could be, it could turn into a victim mentality if you're like, life isn't fair. And if you use that to stay in a victim mentality, which I think we did an episode on that, didn't we? Yeah, we did an episode on victim mentality. Then that there are dangers in that in itself, as well.
That becomes a perpetuating, like, self-fulfilling thing. Like, man, this always happens to me. Why? Just my luck. Like, if you think about a lot of those things, I think that that's probably the biggest danger. And I'm glad you said that, is that it turns into this mentality where you expect bad things. Like, whenever your expectation of good things isn't met, now all of a sudden it always has to be bad. And then you justify, like, well, life isn't fair, so it's just whatever.
Yeah, I think when it comes to these things, it's about like how to feel better about circumstances. And I think that there could be like a game plan, right? There could be a game plan that we have around, like, just how do you maneuver? I mean, well, I guess that is what life is. Like, what's your game plan for maneuvering life and dealing with the things that come with it. And I think it's important to remember that life's not fair. But what's also super interesting, though, is for people who do think that life is fair. So I actually saw, I do not remember the timing of this, what year it was. I want to say within the last couple of years, though, it was recent, that there was some survey, and like a third of the people that were surveyed said that they thought life is fair. Now, if I were to say life is fair, like, what is that? I just think it's interesting, because what does that tell me about somebody who thinks that life is fair?
That is a,
and I can go because immediately is, if you think life is fair, you're an asshole. You are, because what that tells me about this person is they think, oh, you're homeless because of your actions, or you are up here because of what you did. And quite frankly, we all do have some of those thoughts and feelings, right? So I think that's fine. But for you to think, if you think that life is fair, I would imagine you probably have a jaded lens of your own life, that you also are not an empathetic person, that you also don't think about the world. You're probably very individual based. And I think that mostly speaks negatively to somebody if they think that life is fair.
I love that you said that, because then that would go back to your thing of, like, you reap what you sow. You're only in that condition because you deserve it, or because you did X or Y. It's so funny. My brain went the complete opposite way with that. And it was like, for people who think life is fair, maybe they're very ethereal, like, heady, like, spiritual people who, like, believe that everything happens exactly as it's supposed to, and so it's fair like that. Not that people deserve their situations, but that everything happens exactly as it's supposed to.
But the problem then is, if things happen like they're supposed to, then you got raped because of what? Or you deal with things because of what? Slavery happened because of what? Because at the end of the day, it's better that black people ended up in America at the end of the day. Like, it's still always like an asshole element of, turns into victim blaming, because now, whether it's the world or you, it's the world chose you, and like you're like not that person, and or it's because of your own fault of things happening. And it's so funny, because there's literally no correlations for most people who do see different successes and talk about like material success or whatever. There's not really much about like their actual efforts or work a lot of times that supplement like why somebody is, air quotes, successful or not, outside of like being in the right type of place or settings or knowing a person or whatever. There's so many other elements to these things. And so it's actually more dangerous to think about things from that perspective, that life is fair, or you get what you, you should get what you sow, or, all of those things. It just misses a lot of like human elements, I think.
I think so too. It has a lot of blind spots. And I like you said, victim blaming. It can be. So do you want a life that's fair? Like, would you like that reality?
Would I want life to be fair? I think that's a good question. Would you want life to be fair? I think that at the end of the day, I'm such a flawed individual that I'm actually way more like running above where I shoulda / coulda be if life was fair. And so that also, I think that that's an answer that comes from me also living in a certain space, because let's say if I was homeless, or if I was very much more I'm gonna say like obviously out and down, because like we all have our issues, even because I have a house to go to right now, but like I have other issues, so sure. But like, let's say if you're like, there's certain levels of your needs not being met day to day, then maybe they would answer a little bit different. I wish life was fair because I was in the Army and I fought for all these years and I did all these things, and I have trouble, and now I can't get my medication, or I can't do this, or I don't have this, or I don't have that. And if it was fair, I would be in a different space. And
I'm glad you said that, because that helps put the humanity on it for us too.
Yeah. So it's like, well, you're sitting here complaining about life not being fair, and it's like, and also it doesn't help though too. That's the weird part about it. It doesn't help to tell somebody like, well, somebody else, was a veteran and they did the whole story. And at the same time, different people might have a different sense of like, I wish it was more fair, because there are people who are way better people than me who are probably living, way worse than me.
Yeah.
And there's people who are doing way better than me who like, dang, I might work so much harder than them, or I might have so much better ideas, or whatever, and that might not feel fair. And I think maybe the problem with this, like, life isn't fair, and the way we use it maybe so often or base on it, is that it's built off of such comparison. It's really built all off of comparisons. It's built off of like situations, and I think that in the moment of maybe when we think about that, like, oh, life isn't fair, that maybe we could revisit these types of thoughts to see like, well, what am I really saying right now? Instead of it just being like just saying this phrase. But yeah, I can imagine, like, I don't want life to, or shoot, maybe I do and I don't know it, because also like I said, oh man, I work, I do so much, and I could have this or that. So I don't know. I think maybe it doesn't help to think about it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It doesn't change anything, right? Like, I don't know. It could be interesting as an exploration exercise, and maybe this week, challenge yourself if you do notice, like, you saying, oh, life isn't fair, or thinking about that, just seeing, what that really means. I'm also sitting with it yourself. Like, do you think life is fair or not? I would love to hear, like, from y'all. So hit us at Carlie's Couch and let us know. But I also, it's so funny because I was like, dude, would I want it to be more fair? Because I think I'm a good person and all this. And then these are my expectations, like, for that. But also, like, statistically growing up the way that I did, I was like 17 more times likely to commit suicide, 80 times more likely to be an abuser or an abusee in a relationship, and all these things. And if life was fair and, situations played out how like they should have, or statistically, like, where would I be?
Yeah, and you never really know. I think that one question that you brought up, and that we could still maybe think about as we close out the conversation, is so if we are saying that life isn't fair, then why are we trying? Why, if life isn't fair, why are we putting forth efforts? And what is the thought behind putting forth efforts if perhaps we don't, by saying life isn't fair, means we really don't have as much control as we think we do?
The positive side of me was like, well, because anything can happen, and like, you never know what little effort or what conversation or what could open a door and change your whole life, or bring you your biggest client, or help you meet the love of your life, or whatever. And so showing up in this space that, isn't fair, or if you have deemed as not fair, you never know what the outcome is, because you can't like predict. And so trying would lead to different opportunities and possibilities for your life.
And And the reason why we even asked the question and the way you answered it is because still, which we established at the very beginning, we're saying life isn't fair and thinking about that because we took a L or there's something going on. But for the very same reason why I try is because life isn't fair.
Yeah, exactly.
You could walk into the grocery store and somebody be like, dog, here's $10,000. And life is not fair, but it's a good thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and maybe that's not a good example because it's not like the efforts of that, but like also it's the same answer. It's like life isn't fair. And so I think that at the end of the day, your efforts and the things that you're doing, that's why it's so important that they reflect you, what you care about, reflect some bigger purpose for giving or being there, or, you know, actually wanting to be a light in the world and all those things, right? I think that that's still important for a variety of reasons. And because life isn't fair, those efforts and the things that you're doing, it might pop off in some random way, or something might be happening in the same way that sometimes when you put the effort in, it didn't happen. But even when you look back at your own life, it's like a good challenge to think about how many times did I get something and I really didn't like necessarily deserve it, or I wasn't trying, or, you know, something, you know what I mean? The type of things where it's like, oh, some dots connected because of, and a lot of times it is still like you can go back to an old decision or a friend you made 20 years ago and whatever, you know, it comes back around or whatever. But sometimes it's because life isn't fair that, like, you know, you got an opportunity, or that good things happen as well. And so I think that is the challenge to mindset shift when we think about the fact that life isn't fair. And I'm so glad it's not in some instances. And so at the end of the day, it's like, well, let's not even be trying to judge the things that happen. And this is now really going back into like a whole full Buddha type stuff. But like, let's not even judge the things as good or bad that are happening to you. It is like, life is life. And of course you will feel negative effects from certain things and positive effects, but it's not really on you to judge it, because that's just so subjective and you don't know until the end of it, essentially.
And I think that's a good reframe as well, about like just enjoying the journey and the process and not being so attached to the outcomes of the things that you're doing. Like, your inputs matter strictly because they're inputs, or you being matters just because you're being. And so I think that could help us also detach like from expectations, you know, and the impact they can have on us if things don't go our way.
Yeah, I would say like a goal for living life is doing things that can keep you in a space that feels pretty good. Like, can I feel good more than not? And then not necessarily being around like what's happening, but like how you feel even in doing whatever you're doing. So yeah, that's our episode around life not being fair, which it isn't, but sometimes you can say I'm thankful for that, and sometimes it's like, man, I wish. And so let us know if that sparked any thoughts from you. If you have any comments, questions, definitely open to you leaving those. And then also we have a review / comment that I'll let Carlie read.
Yeah. So shout out to Keyshawn Rains. She posted a TikTok and a reel for us. And it was about our last episode we did, like, are you a good friend? And she was just talking about how important, like, in the tapestry of life relationships are, and that adult friendships are more important than casual connections. And she said, like, our friends are the people who truly see us and the ones we can count on in times of need, the ones who are on this journey of life, like, make it more fulfilling and colorful and meaningful. And so that's why I want to give a heartfelt shout out to the incredible podcast, Carlie's Couch, hosted by the amazing Carlie Carpio and co-host Alexia Clincy. This post delves deep into the complexity and beauty of adult friendships, providing valuable insight, stories, and expert advice. Carlie's Couch reminds us of the importance of nurturing and investing in our friendships, even amidst the busyness of adult life. It explores the power of vulnerability, honest communication, and shared experiences in fostering deep connections that stand the test of time. So let's cherish and celebrate our adult friendships. Let's make time for coffee dates, phone calls, meaningful conversations. Let's laugh, cry, and share our dreams together. Because in the tapestry of life, our friendship are the vibrant threads that bring color, warmth, and support to the journey. And then she also posed a question to her community, like, are you a good friend? And like, why? Like, are you paying attention to your friends?
Yeah, thank you, Kashawn, and shout you out because you should have wrote the blurb for the episode. It's so funny because also with that episode, Marquise, one of our listeners also had sent me a message saying like I think put it in his story, they really enjoyed that episode, which I was like, was it really groundbreaking? I don't remember how much conversation we had around being a good friend, but I think a lot of it is just so interesting that at the end of the day, when you really identify the relationships that are the strongest and the most really can be the most vulnerable are your friendships, because you're not treating them like something. A lot of times you're not treating them like something like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be over or lose or break up, right? And so that there is a space there where you can really practice and live out the way that, the human that you are, and the building of relationships in that space, and practice more there and do more there, and that be very fulfilling for you.
Mm-hmm. And I actually, in the episode, we challenged people. If you haven't listened, go back and listen. It was like 243 or 4, I think. But I, reached out to a couple of my friends, and one of them was like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. Like, in this season of my life, support looks really different, and I'm glad you thought about me." And it turned into a very, very beautiful conversation that I didn't know I was gonna have, because I was literally just checking in. But she was like, "Damn, I needed this. Like, and I need to have these conversations with my friends." So,
yeah, you never know. So thank you for leaving us that reaction, which is nice, creating some social media content around the podcast. And then this week's question of the week, Carlie, if you could have a maid, a chef, a driver, or personal assistant paid for the rest of your life, which one would you pick? Now, do you also have to provide them the resources they need?
No,
it's very important.
Paid for. Like, it would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In my head, I said chef. Even though I love cooking, like, I feel like that would just help my life immensely. The personal assistant felt like a close second, because then they could just do all the other things for me and help me kind of organize my life. But I'm gonna roll with chef for 500.
I would also say chef, and especially if that means I'm not really paying for the food they make either. So I would go with the chef. And even if it wasn't something paid for the rest of your life, would your answer change?
So it wasn't paid for. It was something I would have to pay for.
Yeah, if you were paying for a maid, chef, driver, or personal assistant, like one of those you did first, which would you choose?
Probably personal assistant.
Okay.
Because I feel like that could help me organize everything else.
Okay, yeah, I would still go with chef, and that's why I wonder if it would change based off of that, like, is it which one you really think you need versus like want, perhaps. Because maybe you don't think you need the chef like that. That would just like take a lot of stuff off my plate. But I kind of do have a chef, so I'm gonna let that rock. Thank you for listening to Carlie's Couch. We appreciate you being here. Hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we will see you next week.
Peace.